Professor Zalthor's crystalline body shimmered with satisfaction as he gestured toward the holographic display. The barren planet rotated slowly, its rust-colored surface devoid of any visible water sources. "This, students, is Kepler 442d, the Vorian instructor announced to his interstellar classroom. A death world by any civilized standard. Surface temperature of 52 degrees Celsius during the day, dropping to -20 at night. Atmospheric pressure barely sufficient for most species. And most critically, no surface water for 3,000 kilometers in any direction from our designated landing zone." The assembled students, representatives from 17 different species across the Galactic Coalition, murmured in their various forms of communication. Zalthor had been teaching survival sciences for 43 cycles, and this particular lesson never failed to drive home the importance of proper environmental assessment. "I've brought a human to demonstrate," Zalthor continued, his tone carrying the subtle condescension that came naturally when discussing the younger species. "Humans are remarkable survivors on their own world, but even they cannot conjure water from nothing. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, please step forward." Jake stood up from the back row, his standard-issue exploration suit already making him sweat under the classroom's controlled environment. At 28, he was one of the youngest humans in the Coalition's training program, having joined just 2 years after Earth's admission to the galactic community. "Sir," Jake acknowledged with a crisp nod. "Lieutenant Morrison will be transported to Kepler 442d with only basic supplies, no water reserves, no advanced filtration systems. Standard protocol for survival assessment. The lesson here is simple: know your limitations. Even the most adaptable species cannot survive without proper resources." A Quilarian student raised a tentacle. "Professor, what is the expected survival time for a human?" "Perhaps 18 hours before severe dehydration sets in. 36 before death. We will, of course, extract him well before that point." Zalthor's eyes gleamed. "This is merely an educational demonstration of why reconnaissance and resource mapping are essential before planetary colonization." Jake felt a familiar tingle as the transport beam engaged. The classroom dissolved, replaced by an assault of heat and blinding sunlight. Sand stretched endlessly in every direction, broken only by occasional rock formations that shimmered in the thermal waves. He dropped to one knee, already feeling the moisture evaporating from his skin. The professor's voice crackled through his communicator, "Your time begins now, Lieutenant. Remember, this is a lesson in limitations." Jake smiled. "With respect, sir, my grandpa taught me something about limitations." He unsealed his pack and withdrew items that made the alien observers gasp with confusion. A Y-shaped branch from Earth. 2 brass rods. A length of copper wire bent into an L shape. Primitive. Archaic. Seemingly useless. "What is the human doing?" someone asked in the classroom. Professor Zalthor's confidence flickered. I'm not certain." Jake held the Y-shaped branch loosely in both hands, the point facing forward. His grandfather, a well driller from Arizona, had taught him the old ways during childhood summers. "Technology's great, Jake," the old man had said, "but sometimes the old skills keep you alive when the fancy stuff fails." He walked slowly across the sand, feeling ridiculous, waiting for something his rational mind said couldn't exist. The technique was called dowsing, water witching, some called it, and science had dismissed it for centuries. Yet every well-driller Jake had ever met swore by it, including his grandfather who'd found water in the Mojave Desert more times than he could count. 10 minutes passed. 20. The heat was becoming oppressive. Then he felt it, a subtle pull, like invisible hands tugging the branch downward. His grandfather had tried to explain it once: magnetic fields, electromagnetic resonance, sensitivity to underground water flow. No one really knew why it worked, just that sometimes it did. The branch dipped sharply toward the ground. "Here," Jake said, marking the spot. He pulled out his standard-issue entrenching tool, a simple folding shovel, and began to dig. In the classroom, Professor Zalthor watched the display with growing confusion. This is absurd. He's using wooden sticks and, is that a shovel? A manual shovel? 40 minutes of digging in the scorching heat. Jake's muscles screamed, his throat burned with thirst. But he kept going, because his grandfather had taught him that water in the desert was often closer than people thought, you just had to know where to look. At 60 centimeters down, the sand darkened. At 90 centimeters, it became damp. At 120 centimeters, water began to pool. Jake cupped his hands and brought the cool liquid to his lips. It tasted of minerals and earth, the sweetest thing he'd ever experienced. Impossible, Zalthor whispered. The scans showed no water in that sector. Underground aquifer, Jake reported, his voice hoarse but triumphant. Your orbital scans probably looked for surface water or large reservoirs. This is a small seep line, maybe 3 meters below the surface. On Earth, people have been finding these for thousands of years. He pulled out his water purification tablets, simple chemical treatment, nothing fancy, and began filling his canteen. How did you know where to dig? A student asked. Jake held up the wooden branch. Dowsing rod. Back home, we call it water witching. Can't explain the science behind it, maybe it's electromagnetic sensitivity, maybe it's subtle geological cues we pick up subconsciously. My grandfather could find water anywhere in the desert with one of these. Professor Zalthor's crystalline body had lost its shimmer. But that's primitive technology. Superstition. Maybe, Jake admitted, drinking deeply. But I'm alive, hydrated, and ready to stay here as long as you need me to. Sometimes, Professor, the old ways work precisely because they've been tested by thousands of years of desperate people trying not to die. The classroom fell silent. Then, slowly, respectfully, the students began to murmur with newfound appreciation. Jake sealed his canteen and looked up at the harsh alien sun. Want me to find the rest of the aquifer? I bet this seep line extends for several kilometers. Could support a small colony. Zalthor's voice came through with a humility Jake had never heard before. Yes, Lieutenant. Please proceed. And, perhaps you might teach us this technique? Jake grinned, wiping sweat from his forehead. Happy to, Professor. First lesson, never underestimate what humans learned before we reached the stars. We survived on a planet that tried really hard to kill us for 200,000 years. We got creative. As he walked the desert with his grandfather's old dowsing rod, finding water where advanced alien scanners saw only death, Jake Morrison embodied humanity's greatest strength, the ability to adapt, survive, and thrive using every tool at their disposal, whether it was cutting-edge technology or wisdom passed down through generations. The desert planet wouldn't be barren much longer. Humans had arrived, and they knew how to find water.